Thank you guys for coming in and listening. This is what I call a good faith space, where we have different conversations every week about matters that maybe a lot of people don't really talk about. Um, this episode is talking about the pitfalls of communism and socialism. And so I have a very interesting panel of people who are here who either currently live in a particular communist or socialist location or is from a particular country where they're more communistic or socialist. So before I introduce myself completely, let's go through the panel. Ji, am I am I pronouncing your name correctly?
It's a she, like not a
She.
he. It's a she.
She. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
You can introduce yourself.
Oh, well, I am immigrant from China, and I've been living in this great country for over 30 some years. I love this country, but I just was not involved, and I noticed things going wrong. Um, but finally, after 2020, I decided I cannot remain silent anymore, and that's when I got involved in school board, and later, and so many other um, media and invited me to speak and about communism, and I never stopped.
Wonderful. Um, Daniel, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Daniel Chang Contreras. I am from Venezuela. I lived in Venezuela until 2017. Then I came to the United States to study, and right now I'm as an analyst at El American, which is a conservative bilingual media outlet. But I was born and raised in Venezuela, and I saw firsthand how the situation in my country went from bad to horrible to unbearable, and that's I'm really thankful for you to inviting me here.
Yes, I appreciate you coming in last moment. Um, Alberto, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey Adam, how's it going, man? And thanks for having me. My name is Alberto De Armas. I'm an immigrant from Cuba. Lived in Cuba until I was almost 20 years old. Been in this country for 22 years, and here I am to talk to you about my experience.
And I appreciate you coming on. Alberto and I are two men of taste, as we're both Chelsea fans. So that's how we started having conversation about it, and I wanted to have him for this particular episode weeks ago. So I appreciate him coming on. And myself, my name is Adam Coleman. I'm the author of a book called Black Victim to Black Victor. I'm also the founder of Wrong Speak Publishing, which is a platform for promoting free speech with intellectual thought. Um, you can check it out, bronxspeak.net. And obviously, I'm hosting this on a weekly basis. If you want to listen to previous episodes, you can go to agoodfaithspace.com. That'll bring you right to the YouTube channel so you can listen to those conversations. So we'll get right into it. Communism and socialism. Um, there's a lot of discussions about it today, especially with the growth of Marxist ideology, whether we recognize it or not. But the growth of it in the and how influential it seems to be becoming within America, how it seems to be more overt than covert than maybe years ago. I remember like noticing how these particular conversations were happening within the colleges, and then all of a sudden, 2020, it spilled into the streets, and now everybody is using Marxist language and idealizing, aspects of communism. Um, so I guess my question for the panel, and we'll go one at a time. When did you start noticing a change within America? So we'll start with she.
It's been a long while. Actually, I remember the first incident that remind me of the Cultural Revolution. That I think it's early 2020, early 2000, and that incident was majority leader, I think in Senate, Trent Lott, if you still remember him. He was accused of saying something, um, that he was accused of being a racist, of saying something, whatever. I can't even remember the detail. And he was forced to resign. And I was not really politically aware back then. I just said, that remind me of the Cultural Revolution. You say one thing wrong and you are finished. So back then, and I did not pay enough attention until about a decade ago. And it's just everywhere. But it's in 2020. It become like it's absolutely Cultural Revolution. Before you can say, oh, I saw some warning signal signs, some troubling signs. No, 2020, that is wholesale Cultural Revolution. What we saw on the streets were the red guards, and in China that I witnessed when I was a child. Well, a schoolgirl.
Okay. Um, what about you, Daniel? When did you start noticing?
Well, I think that one of the things that surprised me the most, especially because it was so quick, was the way that it rapidly that the United States started using the word equity and it stopped being equality under the law of equality or equality of opportunities. I remember when I came to University of South Florida, we had a discussion that one of the key core ideals of America was equality of opportunity, while not outcome, and the word equity was mentioned like, well, this is a contentious statement, but that was like 4 years ago. Now everywhere, in every American campus, you have the word equity being used basically as instead of equality under the law or whatever, or whatever like that. So, and of course, the word equity implies that we need to have um, to erase the structural disadvantages and the structural discrimination that exists in under a capitalist system in this specific case. So I think that's what when I said, "Whoa, this is it's going into some places that it shouldn't be, and really, really quick manner."
Interesting. Um, Alberto, when did you start noticing?
Um, I really hadn't noticed until the last election cycle before 2020, when Trump gets elected for the first time. Um, Shortly after, not so much the election and the the run itself, but after, especially with media, especially the way social media outlets were handling everything, whether Trump or whether it was run against him, Hillary, whoever it was. Um, I started noticing little things, like minute things that you don't think of it if you have never had the experience, which I'm sure she and Daniel have. Censorship, one way or the other, minimal stuff. People can sometimes even justify that kind of censorship because it's not, you don't know really how bad it can get. And I started noticing this little by little, and then ever since the last cycle, 2020, COVID, everything that hit, it's been now crazy. Everything is out there. That this drive to to question everything, and it's not so much questioning everything, but to shut outlets and people and people that know what they're talking about with an opinion. That stuff scares me because it's exactly what I saw, what I lived in Cuba, and the same thing. Like I knowing that Daniel is from Venezuela is like it breaks my heart because like we saw as Cubans, we saw the process in Venezuela. The process in Venezuela was so much faster because they had support. But we saw it coming. That as Cubans, we had experience, and that is the scary part. That you barely see it until it's actually all over the place, and then a lot of times it's a little bit too late to react.
So I guess my question would be, and anybody can jump in and answer this, but what is so attractive about either socialism or communism for Americans? If you were to take some sort of guess.
I, if I may, there's a saying in my country that if at 20 years old you don't think like a socialist, you don't have a heart. If at 40 years old you're still thinking as a socialist, then you don't have a brain. And it might sound harsh and funny, but that is, I think, what a lot of this attracts people, because it's when you think about it, it's interesting. It's something that is interesting, but at the same time is utopic, because human nature will never allow socialism and communism to be what is proposed, and it will take away from some people the same way that it will give other people, and then in the long run, when you look at every system that 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 has implemented socialism, it's created more difference of class. It's created more tax on the people that don't think like they want you to think, because then you have no autonomy. The government gives you everything. The government tells you what to do. The government tells you how you should think, and if you don't like it, then you speak against it and you get punished for it. I think that's somewhat the reason that in principle sounds good. It's never worked. It's never gonna work, in my opinion. But I think that's the biggest thing why it's easy to get into universities, into schools, into those entities, because of what it sounds like.
I can understand that. Oh, you want to say something?
I like to add to it. I absolutely understand why communism and socialism is so alluring, because my parents' generation joined the revolution, and I say for the same reason the American youth attracted to communism. What they do as Marxists, what they do is they they criticize, and then they always point out the imperfection of any society. And in China, and there was just civil war, and there was a famine going on, and of course, people are dissatisfied with all this. And then the communists promise they're going to fix all this, and then they're going to deliver justice, peace, prosperity. It just sounds so wonderful. And both my parents joined the revolution, abandoned their class, which is land-owning class, because they want to make China a better place. Same here. They mercilessly, relentlessly criticize America, point out any imperfection. The problem is what they point out. Some of them are absolutely true, but the problem is where in human history there is a perfect society. Yes, there is one called utopia, and that's why the utopia still has its allure and attraction. And so to me, the major problem is the youth, the young people indoctrinated by the Marxist professors. They really don't understand what it is like to live under communism. And that's why three of us, Daniel and Alberto, we have a really important thing to do. We can tell those youth what it is like to live under socialism and under communism, and tell them what that utopia will turn into. So to tell them not just history, whatever, but our own lived experience.
Absolutely. And just to give my 2 cents real quick, and then I'll go to Daniel with a pertinent question. You guys pretty much pointed out, younger people are more idealistic than the older generation. The older you get, the more experience you get, the more you kind of see how things work and how certain things don't work. Um, I think that is why there is a hyper focus on children. Hitler had the Hitler Youth for a reason, right? They wanted to raise the children to believe in this particular way of moving forward. And I think that's why there's such a focus. Initially, it's on college students who are adults, um, and they're younger and they're idealistic and they can become activists. But for all intents and purposes, they've conquered the colleges and they've conquered the colleges for a while now. So the next step is obviously the children. And so that's what we're starting to see with all this legislation, um, trying to implement certain things that's being taught within schools. I live in New Jersey. Um, they this kind of fits into the Cultural Revolution a little bit, but they mandated that they must teach LGBT material to children as young as middle school age. And I have to ask the question as to why, not from a stance of hatred, but why are you teaching about sexuality to middle school age children? And so, I know it's deeper than that as far as breaking down societal norms, um, getting them comfortable with things that um, getting them comfortable with things that we wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with, um, and basically trying to shape children into a mold where they become more, um, or I should say, less likely to resist in the future if certain people aren't in power. More acceptable. It'll become more acceptable to have children see the government as a solution, a constant solution. Um, so I think that's, in my head, I'm just thinking out loud. The focus on children in schools has been so huge the past couple of years in dictating what they learn and how they learn. But also, I kind of feel like that's led to a counter revolution, so to speak, because it woke up a lot of people who really just took it for granted as to, you send your kids to a public school and they're getting taught properly. So that's just my 2 cents to it. But she brought up something, that I think it's really important that all of you guys get to explain. You said nobody understands what it's like to live in this particular society. So we'll start with Daniel. Daniel, why don't you give from your experience, what is it like for the average person in Venezuela?
Well, so of course I could only talk about my particular experience, but the issue in Venezuela is that you could see how the country was unraveling twofold. So of course you could see it um, politically. You could see, of course, Chavismo beginning and to eliminate the actual avenues of political opposition, rigging elections, all that, all the tricks in the book. But you could also see it economically, and that is one of the issues, one of the things that has it has been the definitive factor that has made so many people, so many Venezuelans leave the country. And a good example of this is that uh, inflation in Venezuela went completely off the charts. And a good example is that when my family we bought our home, is I want to say 2015 or 2014, 2015. Things were already going bad, but in 2015 it was like 2, 3 million bolivares. Let's assume that's the coin of my country. And the last time I went visiting Venezuela, 2018, so it's like been a while. one Pepsi bottle was 2 million bolivares. So the value of your home went from, you know, 2 million bolivares value was the value of one apartment, and a couple of years later, 3 years later, was basically a Pepsi, right? And of course, that hits people, working people, people that are retired the hardest, because all of their savings are completely wiped out. And you can see that that complete breakdown of what you consider to be a normal functioning society was completely in full display in Venezuela. It's the fact that you cannot plan anything, or you couldn't plan anything back in Venezuela, because the economy was simply not working. The government was not hearing. The government was trying to regulate more and printing more money and doing more economically art within the, of course, Marxist orthodoxy of economic thought, but of course completely without any type of common sense. And it, of course, it hurt people the most. So I mean, one of the examples that I always use on the decay of Venezuela was, of course, that. I mean, the value of the money went down in an staggering way that people outside of Venezuela, of course, it's complicated to explain. And again, I'm telling you, as I saw Venezuela, and as I experienced Venezuela until up until 2017, 2018. Of course, things have changed a little bit in the last 3 to 4 years. But I would say that's the most remarkable thing that happened. That nothing, the work that you did didn't have any value, and people were spending hours and hours trying to just find some basic services and earn some value, less cash, to pay for a pound of chicken or whatever.
Wow. Alberto, what was it like in Cuba?
Where do I start? Let me. When I was a kid, for example, I remember you would be you would be given, like your mom, or if you're a dad, think about having a child, and you'll be given like a stamp, and with that stamp you can go to and this is when Cuba was still being helped by the Soviet Union, which it was the better part of the socialism of Cuba. Uh, so they will give you a stamp, and it was your kid's birthday. Okay, so you will go to stores full of toys, and with that stamp you could pick one toy, and then think about if you have kids, go into a store, and then your kid can only pick one toy, no, because you're trying to educate your kid and show him, how to not be want everything, whatever, earn the stuff. It's not because of that. It's because they tell you basically that's all you can. You can leave that store, go to another store, and whatever toy is in there, you cannot have it now because you already got your allotment. And that's just, when it comes to toys. I remember I was an athlete. I played water polo for a very, very long time. And as a child athlete, the training is a lot like, I'm sure she knows about this. It's a lot like the Chinese model where you spend all day in school. You go in the morning, 6 in the morning, you train until like noon, maybe 1 p.m., go to school 4 or 5 hours, and then in the afternoon you go train again. All of this I did with my mom managing the food. Basically, you will get a slice of bread. You get 3 eggs for a whole month per person. You will get a pound of rice, 3 pounds of rice for the whole month. And if you were lucky, you got beans. That's about it. Everything was government provided, so you had to manage with whatever you were given for a whole month. And this was like infamous stuff. Like I eat 4 eggs in the morning when I wake up here to eat breakfast. I would never dream of that. In Cuba, it's like you can't do it because then you don't have food for the rest of the week. And imagine having to deal with that as a parent. Your child can't get the nutrition that it needs. Um, the same thing with school, for example. Everything, because the government gives you everything. The government expects you to participate on everything political associated with whatever it is that they want you to do. So if you're in school and you don't go to the protest, or to whatever the president is speaking at the plaza or whatever, they take that into account for you. And then they said, oh, you're in trouble. You're not going to be able to go to university because the university is, we're giving you the education. And because we're giving it this, you have to do what we tell you to do. The same thing with the money, as far as Daniel was talking about. Money wasn't worth anything. Like, people went to jail in Cuba simply for having dollars. They went to jail for 20, 25 years simply for having dollars on them. Mind you, Cuban pesos have no exchange anywhere. They're not worth outside of Cuba nothing anywhere in the world. They're just printed paper. That's it. There's no value to it whatsoever. And then the salaries were nowhere near compatible with the cost of living for you to, basically survive. They went as far as to, like, you're not allowed to eat beef. You can, like, only the beef that the government gives you. If you are a campesino, which is like basically a cowboy here, and you have cattle, you're not allowed to kill your own cattle and eat it for your own good, for your own food. You do that, you can actually go to jail. Not only you go to jail, if you give it to anybody and they catch anybody with that meat, you go to jail because you're not supposed to have that meat, because everything is for the government, and the government takes it and they spread it however they think it is correct to do so. So you have basically no autonomy. You are at the mercy of this government that does not care about you. All they care is about their power and their ideology, and that's it. You're an afterthought, and that's simple. I mean, I can talk all day. I'll give this guy's time. This a lot.
No, I appreciate that. Um, um, and I'll ask more questions so we can probe it a little bit further. What was it like then?
Yeah. Uh, okay, I just want to say I had the same kind of hardship in terms of material, lack of material when I grew up. But also, it is total control of the government of every aspect of your life. We we were told what we should believe, what we can say, and where do I live? Where do we live? You can't just move to another city and live. No, you uh, you are allowed to live where you live. The dwelling is what government gives to you. And my family, we have 3 siblings, and we have 1.5 room. That's it for 5 people. And we're lucky because my neighbor is 1 room. I'm talking about room for 4. And everything the government decide for you. Everything's rationed. But the worst is the information is totally controlled. What we were taught in school is propaganda. And I remember growing up, I listened to, domestic news, which is everything is great. The party is doing wonderful, and the people are all after the party, whatever. And then international news. Guess what's our international news? Only 3 countries: North Korea, North Vietnam, and Albania. That's all. That's our world. And we were taught we were the luckiest children on the whole planet because we were born in this new, into this new great communist country, and I believed it because I have no idea what else is out there, and that is so. When I think about it, it's just so sad. And I think up to I was probably 18 or even 20, I never even did any thinking. All I did is believing and following and obeying. And that is what happened in a communist country. But it's happening here when people have free access of information. It's just right there. No. They somehow were able to control those young people and do the same thing to them, just as the communists did it to me. So it is just heartbreaking. And I have a coworker who told me that her um, daughter-in-law, a brand new daughter-in-law, say she's a communist. I was like, does she have any idea what it is like to live in a communist country?
And generally, they don't. That seems to be the repeating pattern that I've noticed. It's it's funny. I was just having a conversation with my company CEO, who's a millionaire. All of his kids are socialists or slash communists in their mentality. And I think it's hilarious. And he thinks it's hilarious. And he's tried talking to them about how it's ridiculous that they are economically privileged. The father is wealthy, very wealthy. And here they are thinking that the best economic system moving forward is communism and socialism. Um, yeah, we could go down a whole different rabbit hole with that one, but I guess for me, just listen to everybody's experience. My question is, at some point, all of you, you left your home country. Did you feel before you left that most of the people agreed with you, or they were kind of stuck in the everything is fine mentality? Anybody can jump in.
My experience is that most people agree with you. Problem is, like she was saying, they're so controlled and they have hold everything that people are literally afraid to say anything. That's just by control itself. I'm not talking about even acts of violence and everything else that they actually do. The biggest thing that the communist country and communist regime like Cuba, like China, like Venezuela has in their favor is like she said, control of the news, the media outlets, the information. Anything that comes out in the country is authorized by the government to come out. So nothing that they don't want to is gonna come out. Therefore, they control everything, and people are looking at these things, and some people might believe it, but after so many years, people start to be like, "Oh, wait a minute, what's happening?" Especially Cuba, for example. Once they opened up, and there was a time where you couldn't travel, like family, if you have family in the United States, they couldn't travel to Cuba or whatever. But after some time, they allowed traveling. And when these people came back to Cuba, everybody saw how different it was, like how they were, successful by our compared to our actual uh, to us in Cuba. And everybody started, thinking like, "Oh, wait, wait a second. So, if if the United States are so bad, how are these people, able to come over here? They're able to travel. They're able to go on vacations every year, because your family will tell you, and, just talk to you, and little by little, those things, and then curiosity itself, you start looking around and comparing, and it comes to a point where you hold on one second. If this is so great, how is that we are all in this hole where there seems to be no hope? There seems to be nothing that basically you live to try to survive, literally to try to find food for the day to get by so you can go to bed and not be starving. And then you wake up in the morning, it's the same thing. It's the same cycle over and over and over and over. And that's the biggest thing, that how they have control over everything in your life. And because of that, they make people scared. People that do not agree, or people that are maybe thinking, this is not right. They're not gonna voice their concern because they can be shut down really easy. They can lose any little privileges they got. They can lose them. Um, it's when you get to that point, it's hard to correct.
I understand. And you know what? I don't know why I never really made this connection before, but the way you're describing what it's like the level of control that exists, it reminds me of abusers within relationships and how they behave. The biggest thing that they do is isolate people, right? They isolate you from your loved ones. And that isolation also prevents information too, right? So you can't exchange what you're experiencing with other people, right? You can't have an exchange of ideas with anybody from the outside of your home, for example, if it's like your partner within the same home who's isolating you. Um, and it weakens you ultimately. And you just kind of cave in because they have so much control over your movement and over information within your particular home. It sounds a lot like an abusive relationship. It's to the point where you just become kind of defeated.
Perfect analogy. That's exactly what it is. You're defeated and you depend on them for everything. And sometimes the abusee reacts and does something and gets freed of it, but it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot to come out of that. And if you have a family, if you have kids, if you have a lot of people that depend on you, it makes it even harder for you to come out of that because you're afraid for them, not just you. So yep, that's a perfect analogy.
Daniel, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I would say I would add that it's not only control; it's also the hopelessness that they sell effectively to the population that wants to resist or wants to change the system of government. So in Venezuela, we've had many massive street protests over the last 6 7 years. But after you protest and protest and nothing changes, if the government's still in power, people start just they stop, right? They stop caring about politics. They stop thinking that they could possibly be an effective change of government, a change of direction, and they either, well, leave the country or just live their lives trying to see how to adapt and how to, you know, do the better they can do in the situation they have. So I think the fact that they can sell themselves as invincible and then no one could overthrow them, it's also a very powerful weapon, specifically in the case of Venezuela, to keep the population at bay and keep control of the government.
Um, my question for you is, was there like a typical punishment for people who did try to um, speak against the party?
Yeah, of course. They punish you so heavily that the other people say, okay, I will not, I will not let it happen to me. So they stay in line. They absolutely do. And the other thing I want to say is that um, the brainwash by the CCP never stopped. It started at its conception and never stopped, even today. And it's very interesting that when I talk to my friends in China about the kind of lockdown in China, and they say, well, I know it's hard, but the government doing it to protect us, and it's all for our own good. And the Americans, why don't they do that? Why don't they just follow the mandate? And so you can say that after 75 years of rule, they really have brainwashed so many people, and then they really have very little resistance.
That's interesting. That reminds me. I had done some traveling. Um, I had done some traveling a few years ago, obviously before the pandemic, and I was in Amsterdam, and I had a hostel mate. It was a young girl from China, and we were just asking each other questions. It's like, I'm from America. What have you always wanted to ask an American? And we were just asking each other questions. And so for her, I could tell it was like it was very interesting for her because I don't think she had an opportunity for her to have this particular conversation and gain information from someone directly uh, from from America. But I asked her, as someone from China, what do you think about censorship and the great they call the Great Firewall. Um, and the way she explained it was basically, well, I think it's necessary because in China we have a lot of people and a lot of people who are very ignorant and they don't know what to do with that information, right? And I said, for a bit, I was like, I guess that's one way of looking at it. But the more I thought about it, it's kind of like it's a weird way of looking at it. Like people don't deserve information
That,
because,
yeah, I want to
yeah,
say that is CCP's narrative from day one. They know what's best for us. And I want to say this: in China, most people do not know what really freedom is, liberty, what it is. They don't know. When you don't know, you don't, almost like you don't have the desire for it because you never had it. And here, those progressive youth, they never know what it is like without freedom. So it's very interesting. So they always have it. That's why they could go on campus and attack the conservative speakers or professors or whatever. They were guaranteed by the freedom of our constitution. So they do not know what it's like without. And I just want to repeat: in China, a lot of people don't know what it is like to have liberty.
you're exactly right. Also, I just want to say Alberto he has to head out. I want to say thank you for joining us for as long as you were able to and giving us your perspective. So thank you if you're still there.
Thank you, B. Appreciate
Uh,
you guys.
all right, man. I'll talk to you later. Um, no, that's exactly it. They've experienced freedom their entire lives. Even the act of shouting down someone is expressing the freedom to, freedom of speech and the freedom to do so. And they take for granted that particular thing. Um, and on the other end, I guess it's hard to miss something that you never had, right? The concept of freedom. Oh man, I can't remember her name, but a young lady who defected from North Korea. I remember her saying how freedom was like this extra responsibility for her, and it was really, really tough for her to manage. Even though she knew she didn't like the harshness of being in, communist North Korea, but at least it was predictable. I remember hearing one interview she was saying she would go back to North Korea if they would guarantee that she had food, right? At one point in her life, because she didn't know what freedom actually felt like, what it looked like, and how to manage it. Because freedom comes with responsibility. Um, so I thought that was something that was interesting. Uh, Daniel, do you want to, before you head out, I know you said you have to head out in a few. Is there any last words that you want to let people know about your homeland and what it's like there?
Well, sure. I will also wanted to talk a little bit over why it's to the people that live in the United States, and I've had this conversation a while with some American friends that tend to be sympathetic to socialism, communism, or whatnot. Is that they usually tend to say, well, but at least you have free healthcare and free public services, and criticize, as she said, the failures of the United States system, which it has failures, of course, because no system is perfect. Is the fact that those services, they're not the deal that communism usually gives you is you give away your influence, your political influence, your political liberties, civic liberties, in some cases religious liberties as well. In exchange, you get a bunch of public services that they don't work. At least in the case of Venezuela, it's like that. Uh, so when I was talking previously about how Venezuela is not it was not only inflation, it was the massive and major breakdown of normal society as well. In 2019, I was in the United States, but my family was back home. We had a week at least without electricity in the entire country. especially in my city, in Maracaibo, which is the second largest city. So that's imagine there's a complete week in 2020. It was in 2019, so 21st century. The An oil-rich country was the entire week without any electricity. That's a complete breakdown of normal society. The food that you had, which was either expensive or really hard to find, was decomposing. There was you had to rely on your car with a little gas that you actually have. So that is the way that it goes, right? So that is the type of things that when we talk about communism, when we talk about socialism in in Venezuela or in Cuba or in China, that's the deal basically, and they exploit the divisions and the imperfections of any system and impose this really attractive narrative, which is the narrative of an oppressor and an oppressed, and that's also one of the reasons why socialism has such an appeal for I want to say everyone basically, right? Is that you have a really easy to digest, easy to identify with and relate to narrative, which is oppress and oppressor. And although a lot of it is not only socialism that has this appeal and or uses this story, socialism bases its entire ideology on it, right? On the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, and then with the classical Marxism, and then goes and changes a little bit more. But that is the appeal to it. And although it's an interesting and it's of course an easy to buy story, that does not give us a functional society. If we go down that rabbit hole of dividing a country in oppressors and oppressed, either by economic status, as they did in Venezuela, socioeconomic status, as they did in Venezuela, or race or religion or whatever, it will not end the divisions. It will not bring a better society. It will bring a society that is more divided, that is poor, and it will just in the case that actually the socialists take power, it will only change one elite for another elite that will run the country down. So we need to take care of this, and we need to be really careful when this type of rhetoric goes by, and we shouldn't take and say, well, the system, our system is perfect, American system is perfect, or whatever system is perfect, but contesting those ideologies and say, okay, how will you actually plan to build a prosperous free society? Because they can't. If you follow that if they follow their recipes, if they follow their rhetoric, they will not be able to build a prosperous and peaceful society. They will build a society that is based on division, that is based on oppression, and that it will be at the end poorer than at the beginning.
Yeah, I hear everything you're saying there. One quick question: the power outage that you were talking about, and just to make sure I fully understand,
Yeah.
was that purposefully done?
Not that I know, not that I think so. Well, there's a lot of theories. Some people say it was purposely done, but I would say it's the complete inefficiency of the government. The government Venezuela has had a public service crisis for for I want to say decades now, and with the Chavista government, they have a lot of money and they have not invested it in public services. First, because public services in general are more less efficient, and second, because the Chavista government has stolen all the money to keep its elite happy. So it was probably like just a simple incapability and lack of care actually of the government to keep things going on. So it's not that I don't know that if they made this purposely. I doubt it, but they didn't care. That's the point. That they really didn't care if the entire country was 1 week without electricity. They didn't care. We got to that point because they never cared about the conditions of the people. Never did.
Wow. I know you said you have to head out. Do you need to go now?
I can stay a few more minutes. Do you have any other questions? I'm on that. We got 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, I guess I'll ask you this last question, and then I'll bring it over to she. Um, how were you? How was it to immigrate into the United States from your perspective? How difficult was it for you?
Well, it has its any immigration story goes by and in the country, it has its pros and cons. Of course, the good thing is that I was in the United States. You have a country that has public services at work, where you have prosperity in many ways, and many things that I did not enjoy. And back home, of course, it's hard. I left from my first couple of years. My family was at home, so they were back in Venezuela. I was in the United States alone, so of course, going alone. I was 18 when I left Venezuela to study, so that's complicated as well. 18-year-old, all your family left, all your family's back home, and I knew they were having a hard time. So that dual thing that I am doing relatively well, they are not. So that's hard as well. So it gives you feel guilty in some regards. Eventually, they came to the United States, but that is hard. It is good to be in the United States, good to be the opportunities that the United States offers. But at the same time, it was really hard when my family was back at home, back in Venezuela. So
And that's understandable.
yeah,
I can understand that. Um, I I'll let you go. I really do appreciate you coming on, especially last minute. Um, and we'll keep in touch.
sure. Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you for having me.
I'll bring the question over to you. You're the only other person on here with me now. How was it? How was your experience actually coming into the United States? Was it difficult, or extra difficult because of the Communist Party or anything like that?
No, I was just so fortunate that after, okay, I spent 10 years um, in Cultural Revolution as a schoolgirl. After that, I was sent to the countryside to work in the fields with the peasants. And I did not see any hope. I just feel like I was going to stuck there. And but Deng Xiaoping, if you know, do you know him? After Mao's death, he came into power, and he opened up China, and I was able to go to college. After college, I was given a job teaching in a school, in a teacher training school, college, training middle school and high school teachers. So I was very fortunate, and by then it started to open up, and but it was difficult to get visa, and because Deng Xiaoping want people to go and study in the Western countries and come back and contribute to the socialist cause. Um, so it was difficult for me to get a visa, but I managed to get it, and it was in 1986. And 1989, there's a Tiananmen Square massacre, and then Congress passed the bill to grant green card to all Chinese came into this country before the massacre. So that's my story.
Oh wow. Um, that's really interesting. I wasn't even aware of that they did that to the Congress.
Yeah, I think okay. I think there is like a back um, under table deal that and then the old Bush probably that's what I read told Deng Xiaoping it's okay. We're going to denounce you and for that violence against students, but then we're going to carry on business as usual. Um, so uh, so I think that's one of the reasons he helped to push that bill to get the Chinese green card. But after that, no more mention of the massacre. It's kind of like forgotten. And then after Clinton, and the rest of the story, and China was admitted into the World Trade Organization, and that's how they got where it is today. We totally ignored human rights violation, and that one of the worst massacre in China.
Yeah, that's one of the most interesting things to me about China is, uh, from one perspective, I'm like, the Chinese government is really good at doing bad things. Like they're very intelligent about how they move. Um, and I think like from our perspective, for someone who's not, let's say, politically inclined and not really looking at China, they're seeing the growth of China, and they see the growth of China. China is similar like how America had its growth uh, in the mid 1900s, where
Total lie.
it's
Total lie.
yeah.
And Xi Jinping was so shameless and say we modernized our country in whatever 10 to 20 some years. Yes, by what? By stealing the technology, and of course there were just too many Americans, too many corporations. They sold our country.
I absolutely agree with you. And that's what makes me laugh when people always bring up Russia. And I'm just like, how could people be bringing up Russia when China is so obviously the number one reason why we are having economic issues? Uh, just flooding us with counterfeit products.
Yeah.
Having bad trade deals, the intellectual property theft, the consistent hacking of companies. I remember one report I was watching, and the CCP just has from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, they're hacking companies, and basically after 5 they go home. Right? They have shift work of trying to steal our intellectual property. Um, just so many different situations, and I honestly think that corporations are realizing that this model of cheap labor in the beginning that they fell in love with has had its consequences, and some of them are starting to try and come back or use other countries. But I think some of them feel stuck having to stay there and basically kiss the ass of the CCP. Um, and meanwhile, the CCP builds their competitor and they steal their property. That's like when Boeing sent their planes to have them built in China. And then all of a sudden, this new airplane comes up. It's like, how stupid can corporations really be? And I think, stupid and short-sighted. I see that a lot with how a lot of big corporations are behaving, especially when it comes to interacting with the CCP. Um, and it's been very shocking for me to see people like LeBron James and the NBA just in general um, bowing essentially to the CCP, so they don't lose that access to a billion population. That's what they think in their head. Hollywood doing the same type of thing, changing their movies to appease the CCP. It's incredibly shocking how much change has happened within American society to favor China. Um, I don't know if I'm sure you see the same thing or similar things as me.
Yeah. I just want to say my focus is not on CCP. My focus is on America. So my mission is to waken up Americans and help them to see what's going on here is communism taking over. So, and that's what um, that's what I'm devoted to that cause. Um, yeah, CCP is absolutely um, our biggest um, threat. But I just want you to see my focus is here. I want to save America.
I completely understand that. I respect that. This is a part where if anybody wants to speak, if they want to jump into the conversation, you can request to speak. We'll bring you on. If you have any particular question or want to make a comment, it's perfectly fine. If not, that's cool as well. Where actually do you live at today? I don't know if I ever asked.
Northern Virginia, Loudoun County. Loudoun.
Ah.
The famous Loudoun County.
All right. Actually, we do have somebody who wants to speak. Fernando wants to speak, so I'll add you as a speaker. How you doing, Fernando?
Hello, Adam. Thank you for inviting me to say something. First of all, I want to thank you and compliment you and the three fantastic speakers that you've had for engaging in what I believe is one of the existential threats to our country. The main topic of discussion in this country today ought to be the model of government that they're trying to impose on us. And therefore, the fact that you're talking about it, as I was just happened to look into this small chat room, and even though there were only a dozen or so, I felt it was so important just to monitor it for a while. And I would hope that if we can continue this, we ought to have 1 million Americans tapping into this network to be able to hear firsthand testimonials from those of us that have experienced what socialism, totalitarianism is, and how they infiltrate and undermine existing republics and constitutional republics such as ours in a methodical, long term, but persistent way. And lo and behold, after 30, 40 years, it's working. Just look at us and the state of our country today. We're a society completely under attack, ideological attack. The class struggles that have been deployed are putting us all against one another. If you notice, blacks against whites, browns against whites, old and young, religious differences, ideological differences, those that have different opinions, those in the military, those that are not, those that own guns, those that do not, those that want to mask their children for 5-6 hours a day, and those that don't, those that believe in government mandates, and those of us that don't, and to be able to have an exchange, a frank, open exchange, in the good old American way. Now we have someone, whether it's the government or big tech, saying, "Hold on a minute, you can't say that." Because that is not part of the narrative that is being used to undermine this country. So I wasn't planning on staying this long tonight because I have been involved with many. What you're doing here is happening throughout Latin America, and I have been from Washington trying to tune in to their little chat rooms. And boy, they've just absolutely sucked me in. And I have been motivated by their zeal and their anxiety and their commitment to defend their freedoms that are under attack. And I'm speaking to you about Peru, where communists just took over the presidency. I'm talking to you about Chile, one of the most prosperous countries in Latin America, that has now been taken over by Gabriel Boric, a president, a communist president elect that will soon take over. We're looking at Honduras, that Xiomara Castro, the wife of the communist president that was ousted a couple of years ago, working with Cuba and Venezuela, has now taken back the power. We're looking at Brazil, where Lula, the communist president who was jailed for corruption, is now making a comeback. We're looking at Argentina, that is one of the most impoverished countries in Latin America, beautiful country, but now socialist. And so Mexico, with a Marxist as the president, Lopez Obrador, not to speak of Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Ecuador. I mean, we are being surrounded as a country the United States were the prize, were the objective. And now we're being surrounded. And why do you think we're having migration problems and an out of control border where millions of people are literally coming into this country, unvetted, unchecked, totally independent? It's an outrage, a total violation of our sovereignty. And so you tune into someone like this in the United States, and I said, oh my God, great, great. Let's talk about this because we're being entertained and distracted with all kinds of flack and failing to see the existential threat that is in front of our republic. And so, without taking too much more time, I hope to be able to tune in again and participate with a growing group. And Adam, again, thank you so much. And I've had the pleasure of interacting with her on Twitter, and her testimonial
Yes.
is that's right, and it's great to finally talk to you. She has been a great supporter of the cause of freedom in Latin America, and I am very grateful for that. What a compelling and powerful testimonial from you. I was so impressed to hear it. We just have to put you on an amplifier and broadcast it nationwide over and over again. So, again, thank you all. I hope that we can expand this group, and I would be happy to at some point, Adam, if you so agree, to come in and give you briefings on just about any geopolitical subject that you can think about that affects socialism and totalitarianism, whether it's in the Western Hemisphere, which is my area of focus, or the world.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. Definitely send me a direct message and we can talk a little bit further because I'm highly
Roger
interested.
that.
Thank you.
Can I say one more word? One more thing.
Yeah,
To save the world, we have to save America. If America falls, there's no hope for the whole world.
I couldn't agree more.
yeah, yeah. I think I was actually talking to somebody about that I think earlier today. It's a lot of pressure to kind of put on us. And I used to think like, maybe that's a little bit hyperbolic. But looking at COVID and looking at even like other Western countries, I have friends in Europe and places that I used to think like, they're similar to America and how they do things. But you never know how someone reacts until they're put under pressure. And what I'm seeing is how these countries react, who are supposed to be just as or similarly freedom loving, Western countries, just take over with totalitarian edicts, without any thought and not even caring if people protest, um, and just the level of control that they went for. And it's so weird how one country takes such a strong approach, and then you look at Florida, which looks like the land of the free, and it's like we're living in two different worlds, but like even within America, we're constantly having this particular battle between each other. But I think it's a good sign that we are capable of having these battles. We do have a republic. We do have 50 states, right? And so it concerns me when we talk about succession uh, and all these other ideas and federalism and constantly wanting the federal government to have more and more power, more and more control. um, I see the end result at being what this topic is about, communism or at least aspects of socialism. So I don't know what you think, She.
Totally agree.
Does anybody else want to speak? Speak now or forever hold your peace. If not, that's okay. Um, are there any final words? Anything that you want to say to everybody? Um, Floor is yours.
Wow, no, I've said enough. Thank you.
All right. Um, well, I want to thank. Oh, wait, we do have one person. We have two people all of a sudden. Sahara. Sahara, you can unmute
Hey
yourself.
Adam, hi everybody. Hi Shi.
Hey.
I just got your space. I think you guys are ending. Thanks for having me, and thank you for having this conversation, Adam. And I agree with she was. I hope I'm saying her name right. And I migrated in this country, and I feel the same way. You know, and we have to save America. If America is saved, the whole world is going to be saved, in my opinion, because America is it has to be saved. We can't let America fall or fail. So I would agree with her, and we gotta save this country. It really depends in the world. So I would say 100%. And yeah, we need to save ourselves, and we need to speak up as well, because people are really afraid. And I speak because the things I see here is the things that I ran away from, is the things that I escaped from my own socialist country, dictatorship, where government controls people, what to think, what to say, how to think, things like that. So it's scary when we see in the free world, America, we see people silencing other people because they disagree. We can't let that happen. We have to speak out. We have to be courageous, and we have to save ourselves. So I wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sahara. We'll go to E for Apple, and we have one more after E for Apple.
Oh, hi, Adam. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry,
How you
I'm all
doing?
right. I had to just spend time listening, so that way I kind of get an idea of what's going on. But thank you for hosting this space. I think this is very, very important. And coming from a younger generation and also being an immigrant, I see the signs of, you know, dangers like communism and everything. And I think I'm actually more surprised that a vast majority of Americans aren't really paying attention to it. And for so long, I've just wondered, like, why? And I realized that people don't even read, right? People don't pay attention to history because historical patterns always have a way of repeating themselves one way or the other. And like, you know, Miss G and I think Mr. Fernando and Sahara said, we have to save America, right? Because America is a hub of freedom. I'm Nigerian. I'm Nigerian American. And up until 2016, if someone asked me, like, what was your political leaning, I would say, I was a Democrat for a long period of time because I bought into that philosophy, like everything has to equal, you do this, you do that one. And then when Bernie Sanders ran for office, I was a huge supporter of Bernie Sanders. I loved his message at that time. Mind you, I was a young college kid with nothing to my name. And then when I graduated from college and started paying taxes, I started asking the right questions like, wait a minute, how are we going to subsidize all of these free things that he talks about from morning till night? And then it hit me that I knew nothing about political systems. I knew nothing about economic systems. And I started reading. Um, I read so far, I read a lot of books. I read books that talked about liberalism and socialism and all those political ideologies. And I am stunned that you have a vast majority of Americans who are so, I'm sorry, ignorant, really, and it's shocking. So I hope that we can keep hosting these spaces, and I'm going to try to share it as much as I can and see how many people can hop in and kind of listen, because the most important thing is to reach out to the younger generation, because a lot of us are so demoralized. We're so demoralized, and it's terrifying. I talk to friends and I'm like, oh man, I don't know. Like, where do you begin to change the way they think? It's terrifying. And if we cannot save the younger generation, oh, we're in trouble. We're in big trouble. But I just want to thank you, and I thank you. I think everyone has shared your thoughts and everything, and I hope that we can build a better America down the line.
Thank you so much for contributing. The last line about the children, she is in Loudoun County. It seems like ground zero for all the political stuff being aimed at children. And I think, you know, I think a lot of parents are waking up to what's going on, which makes me hopeful that we are starting to see a counter revolution, especially the election that happened in Virginia for the governorship, which seemed to be um, unexpected for a lot of people that Youngkin won. So and that was led by the pushback to the schools in gender ideology and critical race theory or critical praxis, if you want to get technical. So I think people like I really do appreciate her speaking out and sharing her experience, just like everybody else who's been coming up here in the panel. So I just wanted to say that. I don't know how to say your name because it's characters, but I'm adding you as speaker. You can unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. First time using Twitter to talk. Yeah. So yeah, I'm from Canada. I'm American, but I'm very thank you Adam and thank you, Mrs. C. And I saw her interview in Fox News, and immediately I was so surprised that she speak out the core part of why and Americans should be concerned. And I want to share my experience in 2016. The American election, I was in Canada. I was talking with my colleagues, and I was the only guy has the guts to say I support Donald Trump, and everybody, look at me like I'm a bad guy or alien, something like that. And they just question me, tons of questions why I'm so different. And I said because I was from China. I witnessed how the communists and socialists destroy my motherland. I explained and later I understand. And until recently, when I saw Mrs. T interview on Fox News and exactly saying what I was explaining to my dear Canadians. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Miss C, and you perfectly explain the using China in the Cultural Revolution, and to explain how dangerous I mean this the American is facing, actually Canadian is facing the similar problems. And the CCP, they use lots of money. They control the media. Yeah, I mean, Mandarin speaking media, Cantonese speaking media, and they just brainwash the people oversee the Chinese communities. And wow, that's really surprised me. I don't know how to improve that. And yeah, this is my concern. Thank everybody. Yeah, listen to my my thought. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bai Lang.
Thank you. I appreciate you speaking. And we'll go to our last person here, Tarantino Jaws. Interesting name.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Yeah, sorry, I guess I've just been reading over everything that's going on lately, and I just feel more livid and depressed, is what I should say. Mostly because I probably might be the most pessimistic out of everyone here, but I do think within our lifetimes, there's, at least in the U.S., there is going to be a second civil war, and it's going to be in vein of what happened in Spain in the 1930s instead of our first civil war over slavery. Because I do feel like with Twitter and the double standard with one side, the one side, the left benefiting from said double standard, trying to silence the other side, the majority, people will one day snap, and they will not care about quote unquote their civil rights anymore. Both sides will see each other as, at the very most, a second class citizen, at the very worst, not even a person. And I'm sorry for the depressing messages. I just feel like ever since, honestly, the mid 2010s, nothing has gotten better in terms of our political discord. And I do honestly believe it has to do with the economic indoctrination of Marxism in the halls of academia, and it's turning the, I guess, the next coming generation of America into sympathetic anarchists and Bolsheviks, maybe even libertines, possibly open pedophiles. Who knows? I guess that's all I had to say about that. I just okay. Last thing, everything that's going on with this is why I'm now sympathetic to people like Francisco Franco and Augusto Pinochet, because maybe at the very end, if this stuff continues, that they seem like sane people in comparison to what we're dealing with. And that's all I have to say about that. I'm sorry for ranting.
No, it's all good. It's all good. And you're not the only one who feels, a level of anxiety. Um, if I can put a little bit spin on like you said, your pessimism with a little bit of optimism. Um, One thing about social media and especially Twitter, understand that the majority of the population, nowhere near even half of the population, uses Twitter, for example. So the discourse that you see on here is a very specific, active political population. And so you have to understand that it's like a magnifying glass of the extreme, right? These are people who are heavily political. These are people who are heavily emotional. And so this particular discourse seems very daunting. And you can honestly see it, from one group hangs out on one side, the other group hangs out on the other side. And when they come together, they clash, right? But Twitter is not necessarily a representation of the American public, right? So just always keep that in mind. It's similarly how the media focuses in on George Floyd and then says George Floyd's situation is common and it happens all the time, and this is why we need to do X, Y, and Z, and racism is everywhere. And when in the reality, the George Floyd situation is incredibly rare, right? As rare as lightning strikes, actually rarer than lightning strikes. So, always try to keep that in perspective, that there is a level of manipulation that is happening within our society. And Twitter is driven off of conflict. And once you keep those things in mind, then you start to have like a better perspective as far as what the world actually looks like, what people are really thinking, and just start talking to people. Talk to less politically active people to see where they think. If you go to work, talk to people, and you find that most people are pretty apolitical. They're pretty moderate. Even if they vote Democrat, they're pretty moderate. Republican, pretty moderate. So that would be my 2 cents when it comes to that, to bring some optimism. Eli, I will go to you as the last speaker here.
Hey everyone.
How you doing, Eli?
Very nice to meet everyone. Thanks, Adam, for hosting this. My name is Eli. I basically born in the actual USSR in 1972, so I vividly remember what it looks like because like the breakup of the Soviet Union happened when I was 19. So one observation that she made that is particularly great is that when people are born in the free society, they most of the time cannot really appreciate freedom and take it for granted, which is particularly disturbing, like from what I see right now, because many people engage in totalitarian and authoritarian discourse on the left because those people want justice. They just do not understand that justice is never a collective value. It's always individual. And, you know, it takes a lot of insight and actual experience to understand that it never works the way that they think it works. Like, they're not necessarily bad people, but they do not understand like core mechanics of a healthy society. And, you know, it so happened that I didn't use Twitter much before recently. I mostly like my social network was Facebook, and it just so happened that like most of people on my feed were predominantly woke, as we now call it, and I really started to think that this is the new norm, and maybe I don't understand something because now I live in the United States on work visa, but you know, I'm not from here. Maybe I don't understand something, and maybe it's just the new norm, and the disturbing signs that I see are due to my lack of understanding. But then, like just by pure accident, I found on Twitter people from here that think and say things exactly like I see them, and that was a huge relief, actually. So I want to thank everyone who actually speaks up and says things about what's currently happening in America, because this is not healthy. This is very dangerous, and getting rid of it and returning to like normal, healthy society when people can really be open about their ideas and, you know, discuss things and have the freedom. It's not going to be easy, but I'm starting to see the chance. So thank you.
Thank you, Eli. I really appreciate it, and that's a good end note from Eli. I'll go back to you again before we end. Do you want to say anything?
I'm so grateful that you invited me in to this little platform and to meet a lot of the people. Some of them I saw here and there. Sahara, I know where you. I watched your video in YouTube. So that's what we do. We need to share um, ideas and support each other. And there's one speaker. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. Feel depressed. That's how I felt. I feel so depressed. In especially 2020, but I finally took action. I got involved. And now I feel empowered that I'm making an impact, not just stay home and feel depressed. And I urge everyone, get involved. Get involved in your local organizations, Republican, conservative organizations, and together we'll fight this war. We'll win this war. We don't have any choices. We have to win this war.
Thank you, and the pleasure is all mine. I really do appreciate you coming on and for those final words. Um, I guess the final words for myself is, you know, I guess I'm generally an optimistic person. and I look for the positives. Like I said before, there's small things that have been happening since 2020, especially starting last year, after the election year, and a lot of emotions started to go back to normal, and the easing down of lockdowns and things like that. So life in America starts to feel more normal. And I think people are coming back into their rational mind and really taking a look at things, being critical of our government. 2020 was a red pill for a lot of people to really see what society has been turning into, whether it be positive or negative. And understanding in a deeper way that sitting on the sidelines is not for everybody. Some people can sit on the sidelines, and some people feel like they have to do something. I wrote my book because that was my way of saying something in the cultural discourse. And other people, other normal Americans, feel that they needed to do the same thing. And these particular conversations need to happen. I wouldn't be talking to any of you if I just sat in my office and just worked like normal and just kept my feelings to myself. I wanted to affect some sort of change, some sort of cultural change. And now I'm here. And so all it takes is for you to get up and do something. If you want to run for office, run for office. If you want to support someone who's running for office, support them. If it's by campaigning for them, giving them money, have at it. Let's get rid of these corrupt people who are trying to push this particular agenda. Let's call out terrible ideas while supporting free speech. And you can do both. Let's not cave in to the idea of censorship as being something that we should seek, no matter what your political spectrum is. Because it always sounds good when the person that you disagree with gets censored, but it always comes for you. And the people who want to control information, they may not always agree with what you think. And so at that point, I say we need to have a free exchange of information. Because like everybody stated on the panel, when the communists got in power, the socialists got in power, what were the first thing they do? Control information, right? And that's how you silence people. And that is why I'm adamant about the ability to speak freely, even if it's reckless, even if it's disgusting. I obviously don't agree with the KKK, but I wouldn't want them to be silenced because I know that will come in my direction. If whoever holds that amount of power to silence them, they can do it to me by saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. So those are my parting words. Get up and do something about it if it's bothering you that much. And with that, I want to say, come again next week, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard. Different panel, different topic, but a nice, cordial conversation. So I appreciate Shi. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody else, for listening. Have a wonderful night. Stay safe, stay healthy.